Rugby World Rankings for the 8th of July, folks. It is a beautiful day here in Auckland, and it is a beautiful time for the Rugby World Rankings because there's absolute chaos. Teams are taking points off each other. There's movement up and down. Everybody's in action. Not like Six Nations time or Rugby Championship time where just half the world is in action. Nope. Everybody's getting some games. We will go through the rankings as they sit after the first week of July internationals, and you guys can let us know your thoughts on how fairly or not you think the rankings are. I did see Victor Matfield speak just the other day about how potentially the Rugby World Cup runner-up in the final, that'd be the All Blacks, potentially should be the number 2 team in the world. There's a potential they could take that number 2 spot, but we'll get to that shortly. How were things affected by the week that was? Well, the Irish lost to the South Africans, and they thus lost some points. So South Africa extend their lead at the top of the Rugby World Rankings. It is difficult for South Africa to take points off other sides because you can't take points from anyone who is more than 10 points below you. So you can see from the list, they could take points from Ireland, New Zealand, France, and England. Those are the only teams South Africa can take points from. And remember, when you're calculating the world rankings, home sides are scored at +3. So South Africa for their next game will be scored at 97.86. So that's even more difficult for them to take points off other teams. You get what I mean? So yes, for South Africa to extend their lead is quite difficult, but the fact that Ireland's coming to town means they can still take points if they get a second win in 2 weeks against the Irish, but they did take points in the first game, up from 94.54 and the Irish down from 90.69, so slight points exchange between those two sides, but they still retain their number 1 and number 2 places. New Zealand, with Scott Robertson having taken over, got a very narrow win over the English, up into the 90s in terms of their Rugby World ranking, but still at number 3. And then France also extended their points in the Rugby World rankings from 87.92 to 88.49 with their away win over the Argentinians. Certainly flying the flag for the Northern Hemisphere with that win. England are down, but it's not too kind of horrendous in terms of the amount of points they lost, because remember, they were away from home. Scotland, no change with their win over the Canadians, as emphatic as it was. They scored 70-odd points against the Canadians, a game I haven't just seen yet. But yeah, like I said, the Canadians are way down on 60.9. So far too low for the Scots to take any points in that regard. The Argentinians drop points to the French. The Aussies are the first one we see actually move a Rugby World Rankings placing. They are up from 9th into 8th. So Joe Schmidt's first game in charge sees them go past the Italians, who they had dropped below at the World Cup. And the Italians, with their loss to Samoa, which was something of an unexpected one, see their biggest change in any points of all the teams this weekend. They're down from 79.41 to 77.99. So kind of a 1.5 loss for the Italians. They were not expected to lose that one to Samoa. If you haven't seen it, the Samoans played a really entertaining brand of rugby. The conditions were not great at times, and the broadcast had some technical difficulties, but with very limited time to prepare against a professional Six Nations outfit who've been high flying, Samoa did really well. But we'll get to them in a second. Fiji are also up with their win over the Georgians, up onto this side of the whiteboard, up from 11th into 10th, which sees Wales drop to that side of my whiteboard. So in 11th spot, Wales, which is a little bit troubling. They can bounce back to this side of the whiteboard if they can get a victory over the Aussies in game 2. Japan beat the Māori All Blacks. Well, Japan 15 beat the Māori All Blacks, but that's a non-test game, so no change in the world rankings for them. They are still in 12th. Samoa, the one I said, had a big win, so they are up from 15th into 14th. They passed the Georgians. The Georgians, remember, lost to Fiji, so they are down. Tonga didn't play, but they are up next week. They are in 15th. Portugal in 16th. Remember, they've got the Springboks coming up, but they've got Namibia first, so they are in Africa at the moment. Uruguay, no change in their world rankings, but they are up a spot because the US dropped below them. And USA are kind of a bad story as well. I mean, as much as Wales has been kind of a negative news story for a wee while with everything going on in the WRU and some on-field results not going their way. The USA, not qualifying for the last World Cup. The best news is for them is they've got the World Cup after the next one as hosts, but results haven't been great. They hosted Romania and lost 22-20. So, yeah, it's not been great for the US. Spain, no change for them. They're in 19th, and then Romania up in terms of their pointage, but they are still in 20th spot, just off the whiteboard. Chile and Canada in 21st and 22nd, respectively. But, yeah, that's how things are sitting. Like I said, how fair do you think things are? Be hard for me to argue the All Blacks are second at the minute, seeing they kind of just scraped past England, but it is very much a new All Black side, and we'll see if they can take second spot in their next game. It will partly depend on what happens with other games. If South Africa beat Ireland, they will still take some points, but very minimal, just because, as I said, South Africa are quite far ahead of everyone else, and they'll be at home, so they'll be at +3. Ireland can, believe it or not, still take number 1 spot in the world, but they would need a 16-point or more win over the Box. The way the world rankings work is you take a smaller chunk of points if you win between 1 and 15-point margin, and 16 points plus, you take a bigger chunk. So Ireland would need that 16-point win, which seems unlikely because the teams tend to play pretty close arm wrestle matches. The All Blacks can pass Ireland if they beat England. England can pass New Zealand, but again, they would need a 16-point win. And at Eden Park, where the All Blacks haven't lost since 1994, I think a 1-point win would be worthy of celebration, let alone a 16-point one. Australia and Wales. Australia can't catch Argentina, but Wales can jump back onto the side of the board if they manage to get past the Wallabies. And the Argentinians can't catch the Scots if they win, and the French also can't catch the All Blacks if they get a win. So shouldn't be too much in the way of changes there. We do have other games outside the kind of Tier 1 teams. The US are hosting the Scots. They'll be hoping to do a bit better than the Canadians did. Tonga is hosting Italy, which should be a big game, a chance for the Italians to bounce back and the chance for the Tongans to get a game because they sat in week 1. Canada's taking on Romania. That'll be an interesting one. You'd think Romania potentially favourites with that win over the US. Samoa taking on Spain will be an interesting one because when was the last time we saw Samoa get back-to-back home games? Japan taking on Georgia, also an interesting one in terms of where those teams are at. You look at them, they're not too far away from each other in terms of world rankings. And Namibia taking on Portugal, like I mentioned. So good to see more games, man. Like, we watch as many as we can, I'm sure, as rugby fans. You watch your own team and whatever the other games that your local broadcaster decides to chuck on the TV. But yeah, very, very interesting time to be a rugby fan. You guys let us know your thoughts. How fairly or not do you think the rankings have the teams sitting at the moment? Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, or if you're just dropping by. Drop us a like, drop us a comment, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.